rage, the angry tweet, the rude gesture, the sarcastic troll. All of this undermines solutions. Public discourse has become about domination, being offended that others dare to be offended. Defensiveness is disguised as disgust. Opinions calcified so they can be thrown as stones. It seems that everyone is screaming. The screaming is streaming through our computers. The screaming is beaming through our television screens. Screaming is driving traffic and making rude gestures. Everyone is on edge, ready to leap into the raging fire. What can we do? First, I want us to pause and reflect and realize that all of this screaming is not anger. I want to share my own analysis of emotions. It's slightly different from what that Psychology Today listed there at the beginning of the service that Sam read to us. First, I break down emotions into two categories: the personal and the moral. Now, personal emotions have to do with gaining or losing pleasure. When we get something we want, we're glad. When we lose something, we're sad. When we anticipate losing, we are scared. When we anticipate gain, we have desire. Fear and desire are often accompanied by screaming. Fear can look a lot like anger. A cornered dog barks. A threatened person screams. The fight response to fear looks like anger. But it is really defensiveness. Some people claim that the best defense is a good offense, and so they walk through life being as offensive as possible. A wall of rage. They are as prickly as porcupines. Desire can look like anger. Think of the faces of the basketball players and the hockey players in the recent championship series. The face of competition is rage. They won. They are not truly angry. They just really, really want to win. Another situation is when a child walks in on her parents making love, she often thinks her parents are fighting because the screaming and the faces look a lot like anger. Anger belongs to my second category. True anger belongs to my second category of emotions, what I call the moral emotions. Personal emotions are reflexive. They just happen. They're a non-thinking response to gain or loss, pleasure and pain. But moral emotions require a concept of equity or fairness. It's more than caring for what you want. Moral emotions are about everybody's need. When one anticipates equity and fairness, one has hope. When one experiences it, one experiences peace. And you think of the complexity of the Jewish word shalom, which doesn't mean just absence of war, but the presence of justice and good feeling all around. When one experiences inequity, that is what I call true anger. The sense that things are not fair. And the way to get through anger is to take actions that make things more fair. But before I deal with anger. I want to deal with spite. Spite is when you have no expectation of justice. All you want is vengeance. Spite is experienced by elites who are disgusted with the peons, who think that they are above the law. The law for them is to punish the people that they think are less equal. The law controls the bodies of women. It allows for police brutality. It separates immigrant children from their parents, punishing those who seek to escape oppression. But spite is also used by the disenfranchised. They also feel that the rules don't apply. The terrorist straps a bomb onto themselves and takes innocent people away. It's not about justice. It's about, I hurt and I want you to hurt too. So when we are wanting to scream, we need to pause and reflect. Is our screaming defensiveness, fear? Is it disgust or spite? Is it just because we really want it, I want it? Is it a temper tantrum? Or is our anger truly seeking justice for all? If not, our righteous indignation may merely be spite. I think of Jesus, who used anger to chase the moneylenders from the temple. He used a whip to lash out and chase them. He sought to bring equity to worship. If he had been spiteful, he just would have found them and killed them in their sleep. If we don't analyze our rage, it will destroy us. If our rage is not about justice, it might be spite, greedy desire, or fearful defensiveness. Before we lash out, we need to look inward. And even if our anger is justified, it can still eat us. If we simmer and seethe in anger, but take no action, it will poison us, and we'll become bitter and sink into spitefulness. Gail will now sing a song, What is Eating You?
You are boiling it. You are brewing it. You're obsessed with it. You're pursuing it. You enjoy yourself while you're chewing it, but you eat yourself while you're doing it. What is eating you? What is eating you? What is eating you is your anger. What is eating you? What is eating you? What is eating you is your anger. People treat you bad, and that makes you mad. You don't count to 10, you just want revenge. But you never try for a reason why, and you nurse a grudge, and you never budge. What is eating you? What is eating you? What is eating you is your anger. What is eating you? What is eating you? What is eating you is your anger. You're so sensitive that no one can live without crossing you and upsetting you. You think no one cares and your temper flares. You must stop your hate before it's too late. What is eating you? What is eating you? What is eating you is your anger. What is eating you? What is eating you? What is eating you is your anger.
should be doing wonderful patter to keep you entertained.
But I'm still angry.
Okay, good. Theologian Reinhold Niebuhr composed the Serenity Prayer, which is familiar to many, especially those recovering from addiction. Some of you may be able to say it with me. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. These helpful words can help us cope. The moral person thinks that the world should be fair. But even the casual observer can see that it is not. The world needs to change, but sometimes we are powerless, or at least we feel powerless. The situation is not ripe for change to actually occur. We can take small actions, but they seem futile. This is when I think of and get inspired by peace-loving Quakers. They have refused to participate in every American war. Their protest has not prevented this nation from being combative. And they may never succeed. Yet somehow they persist peacefully in a world that treats them unfairly, a world that continues to choose might over right. Time after time, the world shows them that the world will never change in the face of continued failure. They must take comfort in the morality of their actions. Taking action to protest the wars helps them cope. They can say, at least I took a stand. But just as important as those stands are the fact that they gather in community and are empathetic to one another and support each other, and gives them strength to bear witness to the possibility of peace. This song is Bowl of Cherries. Like the World, it was written by Janet Aiello, who is lead singer of a band called Ashcan School in Kenosha, Wisconsin. Gail sang back up for them. If you like Blondie or The Pretenders, you would really like her.
I know you're angry. I know why. 'Cause life just isn't a bowl of cherries. Don't hide your feelings, but don't run away. Just fight injustice, have pity and pray. Happy-go-lucky was my middle name, till somebody hurt me and put me to shame. I try to be humble, I try to be meek, but all of my struggles just make me weak. I know you're angry, well, I'm angry too. No sympathetic point of view. It's every man, woman, child for themselves. It's all a struggle, no matter the wealth. Happy-go-lucky was your middle name, till somebody hurt you and put you to shame. We try to be gracious, we try to be good, but all our intentions get misunderstood. I know you're angry, and I know why. 'cause life just isn't a bowl of cherries. 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 This is a dulcimer. It's usually played as an Appalachian Mountain instrument in a folk style, very calmly, very folky, very gently. But Charlie, when I first met him, was known as a rock and roll punk dulcimer player. Fair warning, fair warning.
She never knew that she would be a minister's wife. She said she knew I was in seminary, but she didn't know what career was going to take. Courage to change the things you can. Courage doesn't mean never being afraid. Courage is doing the right thing even though you are afraid. Anger over a moral outrage can give one courage. Sometimes the situation is so unjust that one just has to take action. 50 years ago this month, a stone riot occurred as a protest against police brutality. Here's the story of Marsha P. Johnson and Sylvia Rivera, two transgender women of color who led the uprising. Natasha Schaffler tells her story on the Penn State Women's and History website. At this point, in 1969, the Stonewall Inn was one of the few places in the city that the gay community was able to commune without suffering harassment from the police and public shaming. Furthermore, the regular patrons of Stonewall were not the mainstream members of the gay community, white males with lots of money to spend, but rather the most marginalized members. The most common patrons at Stonewall were drag queens, transgender people, butch lesbians, and male sex workers and homeless youth. Most of these patrons also happened to be living in poverty. By the virtue of that fact, they were outcasts even in their own subculture. Many were also people of color. At that time, much of the gay community tended to sideline members who were not white. Martha P. Johnson was celebrating her 25th birthday during the early morning hours of June 28, 1969, when the police began a raid of Stonewall under the guise of busting the establishment for selling liquor without a license. When the police began arresting and harassing gay persons at the club, however, the gay community had had enough. Too many times, establishments across the city where gay patrons congregated have been raided, and too many times gay patrons had suffered persecution by the police. At the time, it was standard procedure for the police officers to lead women into the club to the bathroom to verify their sex and promptly arrest any cross-dressers among the crowd. According to eyewitness reports, the police also began sexually harassing lesbian patrons at the bar that night while they frisked them. At this point, a crowd of sympathizers had begun to gather outside the inn, and they watched in horror as employees and drag queens alike were dragged outside and violently handled by the police before being shoved in a car. Finally, when the police officers clubbed a butch lesbian named Stormy DeLavere over the head for saying her handcuffs were too tight, a violent riot broke out, and the crowd exploded. They could no longer stand silently and watch members of their own community be assaulted and unjustly imprisoned for their sexuality. And it was against the law. You got to remember, this is against the law. And even at the time, in a separate survey, the UU was asked in about 1965 what they thought of homosexuality. And they said, well, it shouldn't be against the law, but 65% said they should be treated by psychiatrists. And those were the most liberal people in the United States at the time. Martha B. Johnson was among the first of the patrons to resist the police that night. And Sylvia Rivera was one of the first in the crowd of onlookers to take action by throwing a bottle at her police oppressors. The riots helped catalyze, spread to surrounding neighborhoods until all of New York was in an uproar. And it continued to last night after night. Their bravery, along with others in the bar that night, led to the gay liberation movement. 1 year after the riots, the first gay pride parades were held. And 2 years after, there were gay groups and gay rights groups in every major American city. "50 years have gone by, and things have come a long way. We have marriage equality and workplace protections in many states, but not all. But little has changed for transgender people. A human rights campaign and trans people of color study estimates that trans women face 4.3 times more the risk of being murdered than cisgendered women in the U.S. And cisgendered is the name for what is the traditional role of a woman who is heterosexual. And
me.
Yeah. And at least 87% of the trans people who are killed or were murdered from 2013 to 2015 were people of color.
Me.
A few years back, North Carolina took aim at transgender people and passed HB 2, the notorious bathroom bill. I wasn't here in this congregation, but I imagine many of you were angry. And there was a lot of pushback from all over the country at this bill that allowed people to call the police on anyone who they thought was going to the wrong bathroom. And so it was repealed partially, but left in place a moratorium on local anti-discrimination laws until December of 2020. That's next year. So that if our city council wants to pass an anti-discrimination law, they are forbidden by the state to do it at this time. There are 3 bills that are stalled in our legislature today. House Bill 515 would repeal the sections of the state law that were left in place as a result of the compromise to end HB 2. Bill 414 would add language to the existing state anti-discrimination law that cover housing, employment, public accommodation. The changes would prohibit discrimination on the basis of age, sex, sexual orientation, gender identity, military or veteran status, or genetic information. And I want to address the idea that these convey special rights. They do not. Because if you can't discriminate on the basis of age, old people can't discriminate against the young, and young can't discriminate against the old. Sexual orientation. If you worked for a gay company and they wanted to fire all the straight people, they are forbidden by this law from doing that. This doesn't create a special thing. It says everybody has to treat everybody fairly. Bill 516 would put in place professional penalties for therapists and counselors who practice conversion therapy, especially with young adults, teenagers whose parents force them to go under this brutal treatment that sometimes includes shock treatment. If you've seen Clockwork Orange, the movie, to get people to change their orientation. It doesn't work, and it causes harm, and it should be outlawed. So these bills are stuck in committee, and I'm not calling upon you to riot or throw beer bottles at your legislators, but I hope you will have the courage and conviction to talk to members of our Social Action Committee. Those members would stand up that passed out. You saw some of them passed out some information to you at the beginning of the service. Anybody that's on the Social Justice Committee, you can talk to about this, and they would help you figure out how to channel your anger. It seems to me, oh my goodness, this song I'm about to sing was written probably about 1980, when I thought America had gone as far to the right as it ever would go. And there are so many issues that require our courage to act. The one that we're focusing on today, but I'm sure throughout the year we'll touch on all these other ones. Women's reproductive rights are being threatened. Environmental laws are being repealed. Foreign interference in our election is being encouraged. Now more than ever, we need to lift our voices and maybe put our bodies on the line. A song called Harder, Louder, Faster. Not too far from Wall Street on a sidewalk in the city lives a man who can't imagine all the money he'll never see. A little group of people make a lot of money and refuse to share it with the people in poverty. It's getting harder, yell louder, turn the world a bit faster. It's too easy to keep silent. Turn away from disaster. The victors blame the victims of the competition. They listen to their prophets. Greed is their creed. What happened to liberty or justice for all? Who will stand and say the people should be free? It's getting harder, yell louder, turn the world a bit faster. It's too easy to keep silent. Turn away from disaster. The unemployed civilian is tempted by the army that pays him to defend a country he doesn't own. He might win a medal or become disabled or fall into the tomb of the great unknown. It's getting harder, yell louder, turn the world a bit faster. It's too easy to keep silent. Turn away from disaster. Harder, louder, faster. Turn away from disaster. Come on, harder, louder, faster. Turn away from disaster. Come on, harder, louder, faster. Harder, louder, faster. Harder, louder, faster.
Well, anger's only one way. God, anger is exhausting. No, it really is, you know. You get so wound up. Sometimes you just feel like you are just slamming against brick walls. Every way you turn, you just boil. You're boiling it, you are brewing it, you're obsessed with it. Just want to breathe. Just take a minute, everybody. Breathe. Just breathe. Just breathe.
Some people believe that churches should not be involved in political action. But I think we are because of the last part of this prayer by Reinhold Niebuhr. The wisdom to know the difference. Because anger without wisdom is exhausting. And that's why we gather here to strengthen one another. I'm a firm believer in the separation of church and state, yet through my ministry, I have been very political. How do I reconcile these seemingly opposite positions? First, I want to define what separation of church and state means. It means government neutrality. No one religion should be given a state-sanctioned preference. No religion should be outlawed. And on the flip side, no religion should be holden to any political party. My political activity springs from the principles of Unitarian Universalism. The inherent worth and dignity of every person is not just something to be affirmed and praised on Sunday. We should promote it, and defend it the other 6 days of the week. We should not give a principle lip service unless we're willing to commit our bodies to the cause. And the fourth principle, the use of the democratic principle in our congregation and society, means we need to allow people to have a voice. When people use religion to restrict the freedom of others, we must speak out. Now, if you are a church who chooses not to sell wedding cakes or to only sell wedding cakes to those who fit your religious restrictions, your belief might prohibit gayness. It might prohibit divorce. Maybe you shouldn't sell wedding cakes for a second marriage. But if you are a church and your wedding cake thing is part of your ministry, well, then you're protected. You are protected by the freedom of religion. But if you are a public bakery trying to make money from everybody, not just the people in your church, to support your cause, then you must open your business to everyone who walks in the door. A public bakery that sold only to same-sex couples would also be illegal under the pending laws. Protected classes protect all people. The church is not a political party. Our morals may tend to line up with one party or another, but we must be prepared to call out anyone of any party, because politicians often stray from their values to their ultimate value of winning. But we are called to stick to our values because we think they are right. Our ethics are rooted in our morality. And other churches are allowed to argue for their morality in the public square. This is the democratic process we affirm and promote. We promote ideas, the debate of ideas, not the promotion of parties or candidates. That is how we keep separate from the state. So what we do in this room, which separates us from being a political action committee, is that we root ourselves in the values. And we look at what needs to be done, and we analyze why we are screaming. If we are screaming out of fear and defensiveness, we need to make ourselves stronger. Just so a big dog is not thrown when a little chihuahua starts nipping at its heel. The Newfoundland will just kind of walk on and not care, because the personal attack means nothing, because the Newfoundland has made himself bigger with some help from genetics. And maybe why Chihuahuas are so yappy is because they feel so small and threatened all the time. When we are angry at somebody for their policies, we have to remain focused on the policies. We shouldn't comment on how much somebody weighs, what color their skin is, except for under their eyes. I see what's called slut shaming that goes on to women of the opposite party, and it can't be stood for. You know, if you disagree with someone, you don't call them a B. You say, I disagree on this person because of these reasons. It's up to us to make ourselves strong enough to stay focused on what really matters. And that's what we do here. This song is called Make Yourself.
Participate in the power of creation. Make yourself anew. The Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said, "Be maladjusted to injustice." Make yourself overcome the past. Make yourself live for what will last. Make yourself more than you know. Make yourself. Bob Marley sang, "Emancipate yourself from mental slavery. None but ourselves can free our minds." Break yourself from the ways of old. Break yourself, throw away the mold, free yourself from your vengeful mind, make yourself. Mahatma Gandhi said, "You must be the change you wish to see in the world." Make yourself share with all the earth. Make yourself find what life is worth. Make yourself again and again. Make yourself make a better world.
Let us continue this conversation in our coffee hour and talk to each other about what makes us angry and how do we transform our anger into action.
I would really like to see people talking to one another about how you move from anger to action.
This next song was written after Harvey Milk and the mayor Moscone of San Francisco were killed, assassinated in the city hall. And the person who killed them was another councilman whose defense was...
Do you remember this? The
Twinkies.
defense.
He got off for murdering because he said his sugar was too high because of Twinkies. Despite 2 years of actively opposing Harvey Milk because he was gay and Mayor Moscone because he supported Harvey Milk.
I think we might have come further than that, but we've got a long way to go.
And Holly Near wrote this song for the protests that came afterwards and really focused on the fact that we're not just angry, but we're singing for our lives. Please rise as you are able in body and spirit and join in singing Gentle Angry People.